Today we have with us Mr. Vivek Lodha, who is the director of JVS Foods, and additionally he is also a serial entrepreneur. Beyond this venture, he has got many, and also a very active startup mentor and investor across the country, and an alumnus of IIT Bombay. And he has also done majors in finance and international management from Thunderbird School of Global Management. Uh, he has also very active on different forums. A member of TIE Rajasthan, of course. He has been a chair of CII. I know him since those days when he was the chair of YI Jaipur, and also is a very active member of entrepreneurs organization that we call as EO. Uh, as I already told you, he is a serial entrepreneur as an active investor as well. Has already invested in more than 25 startups as of now, and I think he is the best one to talk about today's session when we are talking about investor insights. So, being an entrepreneur himself, as also an investor and mentor, I think he is the best selection for today's session. So, welcome Vivek, and welcome everyone. And should we start? I think we should start the session now. Yeah,
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Arun, for the nice introduction. Am I audible?
perfectly,
Arun?
perfectly fine, perfectly fine.
Yeah, great. So, so today I'm here to present a topic which is preparing for investment readiness. So I would be talking from an investor side. So what is actually an investor looking at, or how does investor kind of, looks at the whole startup, their elevated pitch, and then during the due diligence, and then post due diligence, there is a term sheet. What are the things you need to be aware during the term sheet? And eventually, what is the valuation method, and what is finally the exit plan? So I will be talking from the investors' inside. So Arun, next slide, please. So here, so what we will cover today is what I told you about: elevator pitch, due diligence, term sheet, valuing your startup, and exit plan. So let us just start with the elevator pitch. So how, next slide please. So how do we want to do this session? Do we want it to be more interactive, or you can ask questions in between? You can write it on the chat box and I can take them simultaneously. I
Absolutely.
think that,
So, yeah, I mean, it will be better if they can post on chat box, and if something is most important, they can ask in between as well.
yeah,
Yeah,
because it's I think it's very healthy if you keep asking question at the right time, or else I might just miss out on things, and
right, right,
we
right.
think
So
that we
let's
miss.
make
Yeah,
it more interactive, probably, and
yeah.
keep on asking questions and between as well. Thanks.
So okay, so let us start with what is an elevator pitch. So elevator pitch basically is like a 2-3 minute time that you get with an investor, and this is the time when you are going to make or break the situation. So elevator pitch is basically your 2 minutes of introduction about your idea, and in that 2-3 minutes you're supposed to convince the investor that you are genuinely doing something that society requires, or generally you've got a solution to the problem. So when you write an elevator pitch, there should be a basic introduction, and after that there should be, the first thing that it should mention is the problem that you're solving. So suppose whatever your problem statement is could be a big question mark, and then you can talk about what you want to do, what are the solutions possible, what are the things possible, what is it that so basically once you have a question, then you should put down your solution, because you've got essentially very little time. Get your question right. Question is basically the problem statement. If your problem statement is perfect, then you should offer the solution. Now when you're offering your solution, you have to be convinced, to convince the investor that your solution is the perfect solution. It's a great solution, and it's just the thing that the world needs. So when you're talking about your solution, it should be a perfect solution. And then also how that solution is unique. So when you talk about a solution, it has to be unique, because if it's not a Me Too solution, if it is a Me Too solution, then it is a probability that a lot of other people are doing it. Investor would probably be knowing about it. And what is your call to action? So call to action is basically, if you had to define how you are going to execute your solution. So basically, problem statement in another 15 seconds, your solution in 1 minute, then 30 seconds of how you are different, and at the end, building up what is your call to action. Because you've got 2 minutes, if you are precise, if you are crisp, your 2 minutes would go down to a 2 hour meeting and then eventually get down to a funding level. So elevator pitch is the first thing. It's your first date with the investor, and you have to make it or break it. Next slide. So tips for writing an elevator pitch. So what are the tips that you should be knowing, or what are the key things that you should be aware when you're writing an elevator pitch? Know what your audience wants. So in this case, the audience is definitely an investor, but investors are also of different types. They could be an angel investor, they could be a seed investor, they could be a Series A investor, they could be a Series B investor. So you have to know which audience, meaning which investor are you pitching to. Unless you know, so you might be pitching a wrong story to a wrong person. Someone maybe has a very big vision and you also have a big vision, but you are putting a very small story around it, because thinking that this guy can only fund a limited amount to me. There are funds who would not write a check smaller than 5 million or a 10 million. There are funds who would never write such a big check. They will just write maximum 1 million. And there are angel investors who would just write 5, 10, 20, 30 lakh checks. So you have to know who you are pitching to. So every time who you are pitching to, your pitch should be slightly different. Then show social proof. Social proof basically is something what you're writing will be kind of accepted socially. You can't come out with a solution which, you know, looks like completely non-viable, or someone tells you there is a lot of traffic on the road, you would say, okay, I can make the cars fly and then go the traffic problem solve. So there has to be some relevance to it. People won't buy that solution. So that's how it's important when you craft a story, or when you make a story that gets your audience on your team, meaning the audience are looking forward to listening more from you. They want to hear next, what's coming next, what's coming next, what's coming next. And ultimately, when you are done pitching, you should have, so once you're done pitching with one or two people, you would know what are the typical set of questions that would come. You should be ready with the answers to those questions. These are very common set of questions, and if you're ready with the answers to these questions, I think you are good to go. So just to taking a recap, it's very important. Those 2 minutes are very important. Know what you want to do, create a proper 2-minute elevator pitch, and make sure who you are pitching to is the right person that you want to pitch to. Next. So then we're talking about gearing up for the investor due diligence. Now, when we talk about due diligence, so I don't know, a lot of people don't even understand the word due diligence. Due diligence is basically, if you look at it, whatever you have said, whatever you have done, they would want to verify it. So they would do their own due diligence. First thing, the first advice that I tell people is be honest in your presentation. You have to tell what is right. A lot of times you've done a phenomenal job at suppose 50 things, but you mentioned 60 things, 10 assuming, they would go hand in hand. And by chance, if the investor picks up the 55th thing on your presentation and asks you about it, and you would say, oh, I haven't done anything on this, then I think you're in trouble. because then he would start believing that, I don't even know if anything that the person is saying is true. So you have to be, first thing I would always say, be honest in your presentation. Then identify key risks. What are the risks? What are the risk factors? What is the problem? Are there any risks associated? So you have to identify the risks. Then I had actually mentioned earlier also, do your homework and alignment with investment thesis. So basically, when an investor is looking from a perspective, you have to do your homework according to that. So a fund as an investor in thesis that invests into technology, you cannot give them a product which is more like a consumer product. So you have to do your homework, and once that fund is coming for due diligence, then you have to tell them technology is our core focus. So if it is a tech-based fund, you have to tell them it's a hardcore tech company. And these are the basic things that I would require to support the tech. So you have to, make sure your investment thesis is as per your company. Then acknowledge what needs to be believed in. So you have to, acknowledge what needs to be believed in to invest. Next. So there are basically 3 stages per se if you have to, talk about due diligence. Your first stage is screening or the technical due diligence. So whatever you've said, the market size, market share, the problem, how it is going to be solved, there is a basic screening and there's a screen check, and then when people feel it is relevant, they move to the business model and to the financial due diligence. So once the screening is done, they would look at your business model, how your business model fits into your thesis. Is it actually making financial sense? Is it making some profits, at least at the unit level? Is it making profit? So after that, the first thing that they do is they would do a technical due diligence, and after that they would look at your financial due diligence or the business, and ultimately they will do a legal due diligence. Legal due diligence would include legal due diligence of you, your record, also your business plan. If it is a copied idea, maybe it is some patented somewhere and you're using it, or maybe you're using some things unethically. So unethically means, there is a place which is a technology done by a famous institute like a National Institute of Electronics has done a research and they have a patent, and you have kind of using the same technology without taking rights of using that patent from that institute. So these universities or these research organizations, they sell their rights. You give them royalty and they sell their rights. So this is very important that they do legal due diligence also. So you have to, in short, it is technical, and then they would, because it's technical, more broader, then you go a little deeper and look at business, financial, how it is modeled, and then eventually you do the legal part of it. I think those are the 3 stages. Next. So understanding the critical part of term sheet. So before we start here, is there anything that people would want to ask, or is there something that people would want to know? If there is a confusion, because term sheet is basically when everything is agreed, due diligence is done, term sheet comes in. There'll be a lot of technical terms I would be using that would be basically used so that you can understand the real meaning of it, because a lot of time investors would put in a very technical term sheet made by their lawyers and lawyers or investment bankers, and then startup or the founder generally signs it without even understanding the whole situation or looking at the whole situation. So the term sheet is very critical. So is there anything that anyone wants to ask?
Yeah. Hi, Vivek. Neerja here.
Hi.
I wanted to know that you had mentioned that we have to say different things like in angel investors and something different to small time investors. So what is that difference? What is different and how do we say that to different investors?
That's a good question. So basically, different would mean you will never, you're not supposed to say different stories to different people, because your product is the same. But first thing is you should know who you're pitching to. So suppose you're pitching to an angel investor, you cannot ask him for a 3 million check. Angel investor has its own size, has its own constraint. So at times, when you talk about that, even if he is interested in your idea, he would hear, okay, 3 million, and then he would just turn down the idea.
Right.
Angel investor would look at his size. And alternatively, there are funds who are looking like a Bessemer Capital. They would not write a check less than 5 million.
Right.
So even if you have a good plan and you're asking for 1 million or a 2 million, they would, say, okay, come back to us after maybe 1 year, 2 years. Once you've done, you need a bigger check. So
Right.
maybe at that time you wanted a bigger check, but you trim it down thinking that, the market is bad or situation is bad or whatever. And yeah. So,
Okay. Thank you.
yeah. So let's move forward now. So these are the common terms used during a term sheet. And I have actually focused on this because a lot of time people talk about funding, investor, startup, funding, and all these things happen. And, very little emphasis happens on what will the startup or the founder sign during the term sheet. So if they don't know what they're signing on, it's kind of difficult for you kind of end up signing a lot of things that you do not want, or you could have possibly negotiated. A lot of times founders have a negotiation choice, but they choose to ignore because of maybe ignorance, or maybe because they do not understand those technical terms and they're too excited to move ahead. But it's always good to know these terms, and once you know these terms, I think it's easier. So commonly used terms, and basically this is glossary of commonly used terms. I put out these words. Most of these are common terms, but when we are actually on the side as a founder or as a startup guy, we kind of tend to ignore these things, and we're just too excited to move forward. So let me just talk about these terms. So who is issuing the note or the stock? So people are confused. Who is actually issuing the note? Shares कहाँ से issue होंगे? मुझे अपने shares देने पड़ेंगे? Will I have to sell my shares to the, or will my co-founder have to give the share? How will we divide shares? How I go? So basically, you should know who is issuing. So there are multiple ways. One is you sell your shares. Two is your co-founder or the other shareholders sell their share. Third is company issues a new stock or new shares. And company, which is the most common thing, because as an investor, if I had to put money, I would put it into the company and not give it to the founder, because company needs money. When company has money, it will use the money to grow, which is very simple. So sometimes it's kind of confusing, but these are terms you should know. Valuation. Now valuation is a very simple term. We keep hearing कि now it's a unicorn, or ये 500 million का valuation हो गया, या on an early stage it's valued at 30 crore, 50 crore, 10 crore, 5 crore. So valuation is we will after this next I'm taking is valuation only and ways of valuating, but valuation is the value at which the company is decided. So इसके अंदर there are two words that are very critical that I wanted to emphasize: pre-money and post-money. I don't know if some of you might be aware of it, but for the others, pre-money is the valuation of the company before the investor puts in money. So suppose your company's valuation is decided at 10 crores. The investor says, I am putting in 2 more crores. So now the net valuation of company is 12 crores. 10 crore was valued, 2 crore of cash comes in in the bank. So 2 crore plus value of the company is 12 crore. At the same time, the investor can say, at 10 crore, I will take 20%. Now, this is not same as the previous case. Now, technically, your valuation is 10 crores after that 2 crores. So they are valuing it at 8 crores, adding 2 more crores. So now it is 10 crores. So they are taking 20%. In the first case, their share was a little less than 20. It was 2 divided by 12, which is 1/6, which is around 17%, but now it is 20%. So sometimes people get confused between what is pre-money valuation, what is post-money valuation. So you have to understand these things. What is the amount being offered? So I mean, it's a very easy amount being offered is the money that's invested by the investor. But these amount being offered sometimes come in cash or sometimes comes in kind. Kind is they would give some services free of cost. Suppose a technology company comes and decides to invest, or suppose the Times of India comes and decides to invest. So they would give advertisement worth 10 crores free to you, or maybe 5 crores free to you. So amount could be in cash and kind. So you have to see what is the amount being offered. Shares and share price. This is also critical. Generally, during this startup, people talk about valuation. Now my valuation has come from 10 million to 20 million. But ऐसा नहीं हुआ. So if I had invested 1 crore at 10 million valuation, at 20 million, my value is not 2 crores. Although startup is 2x. My valuation individually is going to be decided at number of shares I hold multiplied by the share price at that time. And what is the share price? Share price is the price at which the latest shares are being issued. So suppose first round happened at 2 million and the second round is happening at 10 million. So 2 million share price was suppose 5,000 rupees. Now it's going to be let's assume 25,000 rupees. So my valuation is 500 shares multiplied by 5,000 initially, and then 500 shares multiplied by 25,000 shares. So if anyone is not clear, you can just say in between, because I'm just trying to help you ease out with these terms which are commonly used and people don't talk of. Liquidation preference. Liquidation preference is, suppose, God forbid, but it happened that you have to shut down your company. And suppose 50 lakhs are remaining in the company. So who will get those 50 lakhs? People with preference share will get that 50 lakhs first, and then it will go to the other shareholders. So there is a liquidation preference. It typically goes to firstly to the creditors or the people who the company owes money with. They have the first right. And even after that, if money is saved, it goes to preference shares first and then normal shareholders. So you have to understand these terms. Are you using preference shares? Are you using normal shares? IPO is initial public offering, which after that your company becomes a listed company and it's a listed entity on any of the stock exchanges, and then it's freely tradable. Before that, it is generally between the investors and the new investor, but after IPO, people can trade your company publicly. Like a Reliance share, I can go and buy on any stock exchange any day, but like a Paytm, I cannot go and buy because it's not listed. Strategic buyout is someone buys you out or someone buys 100% of your shares. It's called a strategic buyout. Next slide, please. Voting rights. So during the term sheet, they would say, voting right and board seat, I'll take them together. They can say, we will want a board seat and we will want a voting right. So investor comes in, is one of the board of the directors, then he has voting right. During the board meeting, he can easily tell or put in his views and talk about things. And then, he has that voting power. And it could be one board seat with two voting rights also. So you have to see during the term sheet what is conversion pool. Now this is very interesting for founders. This is something that people don't talk about. I will take conversion pool option and anti-dilution provisions together. Conversion options is there are number of shares that you can keep which are going to be converted at a later date. So suppose an investor invests into something and they say, I will get number of shares depending upon your next round of funding. I will get that at 25% discount. So suppose your share price was 1,000 rupees in the previous round. Next round happens at 1,500. So this guy, his shares will be converted at a 25% discount to 1,500. So he will get it 1150 or whatever that value comes from. Now anti-dilution provision. This is from the founder side. So you can keep a reserve of 5 to 10% as employee stock option or as a pool of shares which will not be diluted. So not be diluted meaning is a very critical thing for an founder. So not be diluted means you've kept 10% as employee stock options. So when your company is diluted, that 10% will always stay 10% till the terms we have agreed on. So suppose initially 90% was yours, 10% you put it in ESOP, an investor comes in, buys 10%. So he will get only 9, that 10 will remain undiluted. Next round, also when an investor comes in, he will buy another 20%, but he will buy 20% of that 90 part only. Your 10% stays intact, that is anti-dilution provisions. You should be aware of this and you should try and negotiate for your ESOP pool to be anti-dilutive till Series A, Series B, Series C or wherever you can. Then investors' right to information. Obviously, as an investor, he has all rights to information. There would be things stating that investor has all right to information. He can visit the office anytime. He can see any papers. He can see anything, which I think founders should be open. And founders' obligation is to make sure that investors' comfort is always there, because as an investor, people sometimes think investor is like a stick on our head, but at times, if you think of it the other way, he's not the stick on your head. He is actually the reason which is helping you to stay aligned or stay in the direction. He will only make money when you make money. So he is not there to, make you waver. He is there to help you make money or reach new height. Next slide. So, and then during the term sheet, a lot of time, who will pay the legal expense? Generally, it is borne by the company. So it goes from the amount that comes in. So suppose 2 crores are coming in and there is a 10 lakh rupee legal fee, due diligence fee, it goes from that 2 crores. Non-disclosure requirements. At times, there is a NDA sign that, you are not allowed to disclose the terms of rights. So a lot of times newspapers give out that 3 million invested in this company or 20 million invested in this company, and the valuation is not out. So it's a non-disclosure thing. Valuation cannot come out. Right to future investment. As an investor, I would want my percentage to be intact. So I would keep the right of investing further. So suppose at next round, another investor is investing. So I would also have that right to invest in my percentage. But obviously, that's my right. But it's not necessary if I use it or I don't. Tag along, drag along. Two important terms that a founder should know. Tag along is typically all investors keep these two things. Tag along is, suppose as a founder, you found a good buyer, right fit for you, and you want to sell all your stake to that. So investor has a tag along right. Investor will tag along with you if he agrees. He will tag along at the same valuation. If he thinks it's a good value, he will tag along. At the same time, on the other side, it's a drag along thing. Suppose an investor finds a buyer for your company at maybe like a 10 million valuation. You don't agree with it. You think it's more. But investor will have that drag along right, saying that this is 10 million valuation and you are also forced to exit. You are also making a lot of money and I feel this is the right fit. So these are the two terms in the term sheet. A lot of people don't even understand it, but tag along, drag along are always there. I mean, there in most of the cases. So you should read it and you should at least be aware of things. Next. So common types of different types of shares that are being issued. It's convertible shares, which is OCPS or CCPS. OCPS is optionally convertible preference share. CCPS is compulsory convertible preference share. I mentioned about it that sometimes an investor would invest, saying that during the next round, whatever is your valuation, they can invest at a discount to it. So their shares, suppose the next round happens at 1,000 rupee share price and they have 25% discount. So their money will be converted. CC compulsory converted will be at 750 rupees. Optional is they can choose if they want it to be converted or they want it to stay at preference shares. And then there is a direct issue of shares from the company. The company issues the shares at a fixed share price where money comes into the company. Cap table. Cap table or the capitalization table is the table which defines percentage of shareholding. Who has what percentage of shares in the company is called the cap table. So sometimes, when you dilute too much at initial level, this is a learning that I have seen with my startup. They dilute maybe like a 35-40% during initial levels only. Other funds are not interested to come in, and I'll tell you the reason why. Suppose as an external investor, I have taken 40%. New investor would come in, he would pay triple my money, and he will get only 20% of the shares. He will not be interested. He will think that, I paid much lesser and I still have 40% shares. He will not be interested. So this is a learning. You should not be diluting too much. As an investor also, I would never buy too much stake in one company, because I know the next round is going to be very difficult. Next slide. So any questions still here, or is there anything that someone would want to, ask?
Yeah, please keep the session interactive, or is it too heavy? For me, at least, it is.
So if it is too heavy, I can tell you the heavy part is gone. It's going to be a very light part now. Well, I just touched upon these technical terms because no one tells you about them. You end up missing these, and you end up signing whatever comes in front of you.
Absolutely. I've seen a lot of startup founders pitching in, especially during our pitch sessions at Rain. And all these terms are very critical and integral to a startup investor decision. But actually, the startup founders are not clear about all these basic terms, first of all. So they get stuck at these terms, and then everything is lost. So
Yeah.
most important to understand all these basic things.
Absolutely, Arun. That's so true.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's just talk about valuation. So startup valuation is a process of calculating value of startup company. Startup valuation methods are particularly important because they typically apply to startup companies that are running at a pre-revenue stage. So valuation is very subjective, Valuation is like valuing something or taking out a value of something which is not even proven. So, I mean, it could be not even proven. I'll be wrong if I say it's not proven, because at initial stage it might not be proven, but eventually it will be. So I can tell you this ways. I'll tell you, to make it more interesting. A lot of people might have heard the story of Ola. So people think that Ola was a copy of Uber, but Ola actually started around the same time that Uber did, and they did not have an idea that Uber is also starting. So these guys, my juniors from IIT, so these guys started this company, Ola. And, when they were talking to people, no one was kind of interested in their idea. And you know why? Because they were thought taxis are so easily available. It's there everywhere. If you want a AC taxi, it's available. If you want a non-AC taxi, it's available. But they did not realize there are so many other problems associated with it. So if pre-Ola Uber era, can we actually make it a little more interactive by talking about what are the problems that you think existed before Ola or Uber era? Like in 2005, what were the main problems that existed? You can talk, you can write in the chat box, however. So seems like no one thought there was a problem before Ola and Uber existed. So someone saying, I saw only auto rickshaws around. That's great. But auto rickshaw around, but access was much less. But you're right. That was the problem. But still it was available. The bigger problem was I had to haggle with that person. I had to call them. You're right, seamless ordering was not there. So your great experience was there, not coming to my home. Fantastic.
one would get lost if one does not know the way, you know. Then the auto rickshaw will take you around anywhere. Now
Absolutely.
GPS is helping so much if you want to
Right.
go to some new place.
Absolutely. They're saying price negotiation. So all of these problems existed. All these problems that you're mentioning existed. Imagine no investor was ready to invest for a solution like this. Facility to trace taxis. See, now we realize this is post-mortem. We are talking about when everything is done, we are doing a post-mortem. Imagine all these problems actually existed. So these are very little problems. There was taxi, there was EC taxi, there was a Meru cab, there was cabs at the hotel, at the airport, wherever most required, they were always available. But still, there was a problem. So all these problems that you mentioned were there. When these guys, Bhavesh and Ankit Bhati went to and convinced Orias to put in money, can you imagine how much money did they put in and what percentage did they get?
No
They
idea.
had, they had put in 60 lakh rupees and they got 25% of the company. Now imagine what value has Orias created for themselves or their investors, and also what value has been created for the founders. So founders also, if they did not get money from Orias that day, or if they won't have raised money, eventually the problem would have never been solved. So Ola would not have existed. If they had no money, how would they execute? And they had their own struggle. So valuation was very subjective. And they agreed for a small amount of money for a bigger dilution also because they were ready for it. Arun, next slide. So when you are doing a startup valuation, the basic things that as an investor, what we look at is there a traction or a proof of concept? So at a very early stage, traction is not possible. If there is a proof of concept, so suppose you've got a new soap, which kind of helps your skin healthy, or I'm just making the story up, which helps your skin stay healthy, or does not require moisturizer, or does not dry your skin. So traction is very late because once you launch it, there'll be a traction. But is there a proof of concept? What you're saying, is it actually validated at 10 people, 20 people? Then the value of the founding team. How motivated is the founding team? How much high energy is the founding team having? Prototype, have they developed a prototype? Then is there enough supply and demand? Because if we create something, then there is a raw material required for making that soap. It might just not be enough. There is not enough raw material to make that. So will I be able to match the demand and supply? Then emerging industries and hot trends. So they also help us to decide what valuation it is, what is the industry we're talking about, is there high demand into it, and also is there a positive unit economics. So whatever, even if I sell two pieces, am I positive at the unit level? I might be having a lot of other overheads, but at the unit level, am I actually making money? Or I'm making a 2 rupee thing and selling it for 1 rupee. So that's not a very good idea. And the value of founding team is very, very critical. I'll give you with an example. There's this girl or a women entrepreneur based out of Jaipur. I met her like 3 years ago, and her energy was contagious. She was completely full of enthusiasm. She wanted to start something like a NetMeds or a medicine supply company. But I loved her energy, but idea was a little weak. But eventually she came down to me, I think a year ago, and then she had pivoted her idea. She was actually doing a B2B supply from wholesalers to retailers of pharmacy, and then she had so much energy and conviction in her idea. Eventually, I think after 2 months of discussions, we invested in her company. We meaning I, along with my two other friends, invested in her company, and she's doing very well. Her company is called Med Delivery. She's based out of Jaipur, and she's doing a great job. So, value of founding team is very important when you assess the value of the startup. Next slide, please. Most common startup valuation methods. So startup the valuation is very vague. It's very, very vague in terms of, how the startup is going to be valued. But there's certain standard methods that people try to apply maybe at a later stages. So there is a standard earning multiple method, like whatever is your earning. So suppose I have 1 crore as my profit, multiply by 50, because that industry says whatever is your profit, multiply by 50 is your valuation. So 50 crore is the valuation. DCF, very common method, discounted cash flow method. So they would make a cash flow for next forever. I mean, next 5, 7, 10 years, and then elaborating to forever, and then taking its current value. So suppose 1 rupee today is equivalent to 1 rupee 6 paisas if I put it in FD, or 1 rupee 8 paisas if I put it in a safe bond, or if 1 rupee 12 paisa if I put it into stock market. So then you do discounting as per the risk. So there is a risk discounting, and then eventually come down to a value. It's a very common model. Then comparison valuation method, meaning if there are peers who are doing similar work, similar industry, so what is their valuation? At that revenue, what is their valuation? Or at that profitability, at that EBITDA. EBITDA is earning before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. So all these things which are, or basically your per unit gross profit kind of thing, what is the multiple? Then there is combo platter method, in which you use a combination of certain things and then you put in a weighted average to it. You use a combination of these things. Fifth is gross profit, which is more like a standard earning multiple. Gross profit, which I told you, gross profit level multiplied by competitor, what the competitor, his gross profit is suppose X, and he's getting the value of 10X. So your profit was Y, then your value is 5Y. So best method for me. So if I had to value an early stage startup, it's more like a gut feeling that, at least this is, and then you do a little bit of peer comparison, in this stage or in this domain, if a company is done phenomenally well, it just shoots up very high. So right now, if we talk about industries like ed tech, health tech, games, during the lockdown, these companies' valuations have shot crazy. Unacademy and Byju's and these ones of the world have become top-notch leaders. And similarly, health tech companies like Cult or Shilpa Shetty app, and Shilpa Shetty app is a very great example. We're also one of the investors in that. So from nothing, the valuations gone crazy because during the lockdown, a lot of people started. So it actually depends on what time or what era are you living in, and what is the hot thing at that time, and that's how you kind of value the whole thing. Next. So what is an exit plan? Next slide. So as an investor, there are 3 main questions, or as a founder, there are 3 main questions that you should have in mind. How long do you want to stay in business? As an actively involved in business, are you building a product which will be a great product and it will be a fit for a Google of the world or a Facebook of the world, and then eventually be bought over by it? So you should have that plan ready. What are your financial goals? So do you want to exit the company, or do you want a perennial flow of money which is coming out in forms of salary or stock options or bonuses? So you should have those things ready in your mind. I'm not saying you decide it on day one, but you should be open to options, and you should believe that, if right now this is the best thing that's available to me. Do you have investors or creditors to be paid off before exiting? Because a lot of times you are in a situation where you have to decide, do I need to pay off my creditors right now? Even if I pay off my creditors right now, what is the exit that I'll be getting? What is the take home money that I will be getting? So is it a good time to exit? Should I exit now, or should I wait for another year and grow the company? So you should have these questions handy, and especially these questions, the most important for me is your financial goal. Once your financial goal is clear, you will exactly know what you want to do. because a lot of time people are very passionate about their business and they don't want to leave the control in someone else's hand. And eventually they get frustrated because once an investor comes in, slowly there is a bigger investor and your pie starts going down. Like Binny Bansal and Sachin Bansal of Flipkart are a clear example. One wanted to exit, he exited completely. The other wanted to stay, he stayed. Ultimately he was thrown out by people. So I'm not saying who was right, who was wrong. I'm just telling you it's a classic example. One of the founders wanted to exit, he exited. Both of them made a lot of money. But how close is this to your heart? If it is very close to your heart, you would want to stay there, but you have to, realize that it's not going to be yours forever if you have a lot of investors on board. I think that's the thing. You want next slide, please. What are the common exit plans? Acquisition, we talk about someone who thinks is a you are a right fit for our company, you're the right team for our company. They would just buy you as a team and an idea. So you'll be completely acquired by them, 100% shareholding by them. So Paytm generally does that. It has acquired a lot of small companies at a very reasonable valuation. So Paytm generally does that. Then there is this IPO, which is initial public offering. You're making good money. You've reached to a next level. It's doing great. You get yourself listed on stock markets. Then you can exit your shares. Your investors can exit your shares, and public comes in or whoever decides. Management buyout. Now this is a very different type of thing. As a founder, if the company is making enough money and you have enough money, you kind of buy out the investors also. That has also happened in a few cases. And investors are happy to exit. They are there to make money because or else they will go to next one. Then family succession. I think this is so I wanted to write probably family funds. Family funds have a lot of money, and then these guys have their own businesses. So if you're shooting to their businesses, they would buy you out and buy you out or buy a significant share in your company, and associate your company with their own parent company. And then liquidation is then you go all out for sale, and then if there are buyers, you get an exit. If there are no buyers, you have to liquidate whatever it is. I don't hope. I wish liquidation happens for no company and it goes through any of these other 4 routes. But that's a way an exit happens. So you should be aware of it. I think I'm done with my presentation. So you can write to me. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me. I keep writing my articles on LinkedIn. You can follow me there. And if there are any questions, specific set of questions, I'll be happy to take them and answer.
Hi Vivek, myself Surbhi here. Thank you for this insightful session. My first question is, what is the structure of the company or a startup where the investor is readily looking for investment? Is it like LLP or private limited only, or OPC private limited also?
So it has to be a private limited company, because in an LLP, basically there are no shares issued per se. So people prefer private limited companies only. And I think most of the deals that happen are through private limited companies only. So I would say, but even if you have a LLP, it can be converted into private limited company within no time. So it doesn't take a lot of time. And once the investor is okay, it doesn't really matter to him if you are a LLP, you are a partnership company, whatever you are, you will be converted into a private limited company.
Thank you. My second question is, which is the best form of attracting investment? Is it debt or equity? Which attracts most of the tailwinds in both in terms of organic and inorganic growth of the startup?
So I'll tell you, debt versus equity is a very good question, and a lot of people are many times confused. Should we go for debt or equity? So when you want to grow a company, you need the growth capital. Equity is the best source. Equity is more expensive than debt. You should always keep that in mind. But if you need growth capital, then you will need equity infusion. At the same time, when you have orders in hand, you need working capital requirement. You should be looking at debt as an instrument, because eventually it is properly matched to your working capital requirement, and it's easier to, because equity is more expensive. You don't want to part with it for you don't want to part with it for just funding your working capital requirements. I hope that answers.
Yeah, thank you.
Vivek, Nirja here again. My question, what I have heard around is that investors are not very keen to help sole proprietors. They would prefer if there is some partnership or some other form of organization. Is that true?
Yeah, Nija, unfortunately, that is true. People don't like funding a sole proprietor company, and there is a reason to it. You have to understand from the investors' insight also. Because suppose you're the only person who's riding the ship. So, God forbid if something happens to you, even if you have a fantastic idea, if something happens to you, you're not well for a month, the company goes for a toss. It's just like every flight has two pilots. Required is only one, but it's mandatory to have two pilots. Unless you have a patented or a proprietary idea, people would join the bandwagon. But essentially, out of all the startups that I funded, I don't even remember except one, which was a single owner startup. So yeah, it's always good to have a co-founder, and also once you have a co-founder, you have a lot of things to discuss. You get a different perspective, and you get great things. So I always strongly recommend to have a co-founder.
Okay. Okay, and so I am a sole proprietor currently. So you recommend that I should have someone as a partner before I go?
I don't know your business plan, so I'm not able to comment.
Maybe I'll send you my details. Then you can give me suggestions. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Vivek, this is Himi. Sorry, one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Hi. So I am kind of in the ideation phase right now, and we are like trying to assess what our market engagement is. So I'm wondering at what point someone should like reach out to an investor. Like, should we have a prototype? Should we have proven some kind of engagement? I know you touched upon this in your presentation, which is wonderful. But if you can like give a very specific answer in terms of what would be a right time to reach out to an investor.
If your process is an ideation phase, you've just got an idea, I think it's a little too early. Maybe your friends and family can support you, but no investor would touch anything which is just in the ideation stage. If you have a proof of concept in terms of, that like I gave you a soap example, even if you've proved something, if you have a proof of concept, it's not even done unit economics, but you have a product ready. If it is a product, if you have a product ready, or if it is a service, if it is ready in terms of, how it is going to look, you can constantly improve it. That's a different thing. But you should have your proof of concept ready, and maybe at that level, some angel investor would touch it. But unless you've actually sold something and shown some traction, there are very less chances in the current scenario someone would touch it.
Okay. And just to clarify here is like if it's a service-based work what would be a good proof of
so you should if it is a service-based thing, then you should be able to execute it at least at some of your relatives' place or some of your friends' place where they can help to get it implemented and see the results. And that way it will also give you a lot of insight about your product, because a lot of times when we make it, we think it's great, but when it goes down on floor for execution, the real challenges come up. And that comes with us also at every day in, day out. We also work at our food processing unit. We think it's a great product, but every now and then we face challenges.
This is great because we kind of always are stuck at perspection and never move forward. But this is great advice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vivek, this is Surbi here again.
Yeah.
There are a lot of venture debt funds which are mushrooming up now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you have to say about them? if we kind of, approach for debt funds through venture capitalists, how successful this kind of patch would be?
I think debt funds are there to provide debts. So there is a lending card, there are a lot of funds, a lot of debt funds coming in. They are there to provide debts. So assuming you approach them and you have a decent idea, they will be more than happy to fund you. I mean, that's the reason they exist. So unless I know what exactly you're talking about, it's kind of difficult to comment. But I can tell you from my experience, if it is a working capital thing, or if it is a thing which you need as a bridge financing kind of thing, they'll be happy to lend.
So I was talking more for pre to post shipment finance, which normally the banks don't give in the case of new export,
Exactly.
entities. Yeah.
That's why those funds have existed now. I mean, had the banks given it, those funds would have never bloomed or blossomed. They blossomed because banks are not able to fulfill. They've taken the domain which banks cannot do.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think there is no question then. So we can close this session now. So thanks, Vivek. Thanks for your time and your expertise that you have shared with all the participants today. And I think it's okay if you can share your presentation with the group, because if with
Yeah,
your
yeah, please go ahead. Please go
with
ahead.
your
And
permission, I will do that. Yeah.
absolutely, please go ahead.
And if there are other queries as well post this session, I'll route to you, and otherwise you have already shared your email ID as well, so they can write to you as well. So I look forward to your
Absolutely.
continued participation and support to this effort of us.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Vivek.